Hi everyone, it's Heidi M, and I'm back with another film review. This time I'm speaking about Pedro Almodóvar's first English language feature, The Room Next Door. So a brief synopsis for you. Ingrid and Martha are close friends from their youth when they work together at the same magazine. Ingrid is played by Julianne Moore and Martha by Tilda Swinton. Very heavy-hitting cast already. Ingrid goes on to become an autofiction novelist while Martha becomes a war reporter. Eventually, they lost touch, they get separated by circumstances in life, but they're forced to reconnect later on when Ingrid is doing a book tour and finds out that Martha has terminal cancer. So Ingrid goes to visit Martha and they start to rekindle their long lost friendship, and they reconnect and they reminisce about their young lives, their past loves, lovers, their fears, their hopes. And in an interesting twist of events, Martha decides that she is no longer willing to go for cancer treatment and wants to end her life on her own terms. So that's briefly what the film is about. I have more on the film on my website, HyeMusings.ca, but I want to point out a few things about the film that I really did appreciate. The casting, of course, of Julianne Moore and Tilda Swinton works really great here as the two friends that reconnect. And we have the character of Damien Cunningham, played very charmingly by John Turturro, who sort of gives them another anchor in terms of who was a player in their lives. He was a former lover for each of them, but then he becomes a voice of reason and a soundboard for Ingrid as she navigates this new complex layer of her friendship with Martha, who's asked her to be there with her as she chooses to end her life on her own terms. They go to a house in the woods in upstate New York. So there's a lot that happens in the film that is kind of fast moving. If you know Almodóvar's films, you kind of have to lean towards the melodrama of the stories. This film is no different. There are a lot of elements of melodrama here, and anything that you would have seen in other Almodóvar film is here too. The colors, the relationships between women, and sort of what that looks like. This is a different era where we're looking at a friendship of women who are older and they're now discussing health and dying and sort of what that means for us. There are elements in the film that I really appreciate from the visuals. The color palettes used quite beautifully by production designer in Van Weinberg, and we also have the director of photography Edward Grau, who pulls from visual references like Edward Hopper for the look of the film as well. I also want to point out that the film incorporates some literary and film references that also complement what's happening on screen really well. I want to point out some film references include films by Buster Keaton, John Huston, and Max Ophuls, who Max Ophuls' films are also very heavy melodrama. So again, giving you this extra layer of narrative in this film. And I also mentioned Edward Hopper, who is very much directly mentioned in the film in terms of a reference here. So aside from that, the film is actually quite poignant, at least that's how I'm seeing it. It does talk about a bit of a bleak topic, which is death, dying, and sort of what we want to do, or the decisions we want to make as we come to know that maybe we don't have a lot of time left to live, and how we choose to end our lives, the people that we want to support us through that time, and whether or not we have family or chosen family there with us. Of course, stellar acting by Swinton and Moore as the two female friends. And I'm going to tell you, I know that I've read some people are kind of finding the film a little too bleak and perhaps the acting a little stilted, but it's also part of this narrative style that Almodóvar is going for. I was reading that he's keeping this film, just like his other films, with a lot of talking, but it's very much like theater here. He wants us to kind of just go with it and pay attention to what's been said, but also what's been kind of given to us visually and with some music cues as well to set the tone of each of the scenes. And again, if you are able to relate to other films that kind of pull on the melodrama, I think you would appreciate this film. It is, as I mentioned, Almodóvar's first English feature, but I don't think there's any gaps in terms of language here. I think what he wanted to say in English comes through, and whether he wrote the first draft in Spanish or not, I don't think it misses a beat in terms of the depth of the performances that each Tilda Swinton and Julianne Moore give here. Honestly, it was a treat to just see them on screen together and sort of feed off each other, and the words and the energy and the setting that they're in. I felt, when I finished watching the film, I felt very moved. I also knew that we don't often see these discussions around death and dying when it comes to adult friendships, and I think it's nice to see that. I also understand the film is based on Sigrid Nunez's 2020 novel, What Are You Going Through? And it also is a story about assisted dying. And I think what Almodóvar does here is he makes some improvisation or makes his own version of what he saw that book being about. So overall, would I recommend it? I would recommend it, especially if you're a fan of Pedro Almodóvar's films, his filmography. You want to see a film that is kind of talking about a bleak topic in a way that is still very moving. If you're looking for a faster paced film, a little bit more directed in terms of the way that the story is told, perhaps this is not a film for you. I will say that if you're looking for films that you kind of want to watch on a Saturday afternoon, maybe this is the one, and bring a friend so that you can have a really thoughtful discussion afterwards. And I also would recommend it if you're a fan of film and other literary works, because there's a lot of those elements that come through in this film quite nicely. So I don't give films a rating. I just suggest see it for those reasons. And if you're not sure this is a film for you, maybe watch some of the older Almodóvar films. They're in Spanish with subtitles, but a lot of that emotional stuff that I mentioned early comes through. And again, he leans heavy on the melodrama, that's his thing, and colors. He loves colors. So for those reasons, I think The Room Next Door is worth watching. If you manage to go see it, I know it's at coming across cinemas now, early January, and let me know what you think about the film. If you want to know more of what I think of the film, head over to my website, HyeMusings.ca.